Christopher Walker rang the wrong total and didn't correct it. Not because he hadn't noticed. Because his hands had frozen on the register, hovering just long enough for the mistake to become a decision. The receipt slid out with a dry mechanical sigh. The customer, an elderly man with shaking fingers, smiled in relief and thanked him twice. Christopher nodded, throat tight, watching the man walk away with groceries he technically couldn't afford. The light above register 3 flickered. Christopher hated that light. It always flickered when something was about to go wrong. He closed his drawer. Too hard. The sound echoed louder than it should have. His manager glanced over from the end of the aisle. Christopher lowered his eyes, already rehearsing an apology he hadn't been asked for yet. Don't make waves. That rule had kept his life intact for 57 years. It had also slowly erased him. He straightened cans during his break even though no one had asked him to. Labels forward. Rows perfect. Order soothed him. Order made it easier not to think about the letter folded in his back pocket, creased from being touched too many times. Final notice. He didn't need to read it again. He knew the language by heart, polite urgency wrapped around quiet threat. Mortgage behind. Grace period expired. Consequences approaching with professional patience. Christopher checked his watch. 3 minutes left of break. He wiped his hands on his apron, then did it again when the first wipe didn't feel right. Across the aisle, a little girl had dropped a jar of pasta sauce. Red spread across the floor like something wounded. Her mother froze, embarrassed, already bracing for reprimand. Christopher moved before thinking. It's okay, he said quickly, kneeling. Happens all the time. It didn't. But kindness didn't require accuracy. As he cleaned the mess, the girl watched him with solemn focus. Are you the boss? She asked. Christopher smiled, the reflex of someone who had learned how to deflect gently. No. Just helping. She considered that. My dad helps too, she said. But he looks sad when he does. Christopher's breath caught, not because of the words, but because of how easily they found him. That night, he sat in his car outside the small row house he'd lived in for 24 years, engine off, hands on the wheel. The house looked tired. So did he. Light glowed in the living room where Judy was probably folding laundry while the news murmured in the background. Bruno's shape appeared at the window. Tail wagging. Pure faith. Christopher stayed where he was. The letter burned against his leg. He finally pulled it out, unfolded it, let the numbers stare back at him. He thought of Eva's college brochures stacked neatly on the counter. Of Richard pretending not to worry by joking too much. Of Judy saying, "We'll figure it out," in a voice that asked him to believe it for both of them. He pressed the letter flat against the steering wheel. I did everything right, he whispered, to the car, to the dark, to no one who could argue. The flickering streetlight buzzed overhead. Then his phone vibrated. Unknown number. Christopher stared at it, heart picking up speed. He didn't answer unknown numbers. Ever. That was another rule. A small one. A safe one. The phone vibrated again. This time, he answered. Mr. Walker, a woman's voice said, calm, steady, like she wasn't afraid of silence. You don't know me. But I know what you did at Register 3 today. Christopher's mouth went dry. I'm not calling to report you, she continued. I'm calling because that wasn't the first time you chose someone else over yourself. And it won't be the last, unless you decide otherwise. Who is this? He asked, voice barely there. A pause. Then, someone who's been watching what happens to people who never think they're allowed to matter. The line went dead. Christopher sat in the car, heart hammering, the letter forgotten in his lap. Across the street, Bruno barked once, sharp, urgent, as if warning him. Or inviting him. Christopher didn't know which frightened him more. But he knew this much, with sudden, unsettling clarity. Something had finally noticed him. And whatever came next would not allow him to keep hiding behind kindness alone. Christopher didn't tell Judy about the call. That omission settled into him like a stone, small, deliberate, already heavy with consequence. He followed her inside, kissed her cheek, fed Bruno, nodded at the news like everything still made sense. Routine was his last camouflage. He slept badly. Dreamt of aisles that never ended. Of registers ringing without anyone there. By morning, the unknown number had texted him an address and a time. Tomorrow. Before your shift. No threat. No explanation. Just certainty. The place turned out to be a church basement in South Philly. Brick walls. Folding chairs. Coffee that smelled burnt but sincere. Christopher almost turned around. This felt like a mistake people made before things got worse. Inside, a woman waited. Late 40s. Plain coat. Eyes that didn't rush him. "Christopher Walker," she said. "Thank you for coming." He folded his arms. "If this is about the register." "It's not," she said gently. "It's about patterns." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were dates. Times. Small incidents. Underrings. Missed change. Anonymous gift cards quietly left in carts. Always small. Always deniable. "You've been redistributing kindness for years," she said. "At your own expense." Christopher felt heat rise to his face. "I never took anything." "I know," she said. "That's why you're here." She introduced herself as Marianne. No last name. Function over identity. "We work with people who do the right thing when no one's watching," she said. "People whose integrity is invisible even to themselves." "What do you want from me?" Christopher asked. Marianne leaned back. "To stop letting you drown quietly." She told him about a pilot program, microgrants, community-backed, legally structured. Money that moved through trusted hands. No publicity. No heroics. "We need a steward," she said. "Someone who won't turn it into power." Christopher laughed once, sharp. "You picked the wrong guy. I can barely keep my own house." Marianne nodded. "Exactly." She slid another paper forward. "Not a contract. A choice. If you say yes," she said, "your life gets complicated. Scrutinized. You'll have to be honest about things you've hidden behind being nice. If you say no," she paused, "you go back to surviving." For a while. Christopher thought of the letter. Of Bruno at the window. Of the girl in aisle 7. "What's the catch?" he asked. Marianne met his eyes. "You'll have to matter." Out loud. Silence. Two questions burned at once. Why me? And what if I fail? Marianne answered neither. She stood. "Think about it. You have until tonight." As Christopher left, his phone buzzed. A message from the bank. Final processing scheduled. Time had shortened. And for the first time in his life, Christopher Walker felt the terrifying possibility that kindness alone might not save him. But choosing himself just might. Christopher didn't go straight home. He drove past it once, then again, as if repetition might soften what waited inside. The bank's message pulsed in his pocket, unread now but present, like a countdown he could feel in his bones. He parked near the river and sat with the engine running. Thought about saying no. About how clean that would feel. No meetings. No scrutiny. No explaining to Judy why their life was suddenly visible. Staying small is easier, he told himself. Staying small is safer. His phone vibrated. A photo message. No text. It showed Register 3. From above. Time stamped from that afternoon. Christopher's breath caught. How? Another message followed. "This isn't surveillance," Marianne wrote. "It's accountability. Someone else noticed the discrepancy today. I slowed it down. I can't stop it twice." The kindness he'd offered so quietly had finally cast a shadow. That evening, Judy found the letter. It lay on the kitchen counter between grocery coupons and Eva's college forms, exposed by accident, or by exhaustion. She didn't raise her voice. That scared him more. "How long?" she asked. Christopher sat down hard. "Long enough." Judy closed her eyes. When she opened them, there was fear there, but also relief. The relief of finally naming something. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. He swallowed. "Because if I said it out loud, it would mean I failed." Judy shook her head. "No. It would mean we're in it together." That hurt more than anger would have. He told her everything then, the register, the call, the church basement, the offer. He expected disbelief. Accusation. Instead, Judy grew very still. "You've been giving yourself away," she said slowly. "In pieces. And calling it kindness so you wouldn't have to ask for help." Christopher stared at his hands. "I didn't think I was allowed to." Judy reached across the table. Took them. Didn't steady the tremor, accepted it. "Who taught you that?" she asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew it came from years of being praised for being easy. Useful. Quiet. The phone buzzed again. Marianne. Decision time. Christopher looked at Judy. At Bruno asleep with his head on Christopher's foot. At the life he'd been protecting so carefully it was suffocating. "What if I mess this up?" he asked. Judy smiled sadly. "Then you'll finally be doing something honest." Christopher went back to the church basement. Marianne was waiting, folder open, coffee untouched. "I'm in," he said. "But I won't lie. And I won't play savior." Marianne nodded. "Good. Because this isn't about saving anyone." She slid him a new file. Inside were names. Families. Small amounts. Immediate needs. "And Christopher," she added, "there's one more thing." She turned the page. At the top was a familiar logo. His supermarket. "They're auditing," she said. "Tomorrow. The discrepancy will surface." Christopher's chest tightened. So this was never just about helping others. Marianne met his gaze. "No. It was about whether you'd finally stop paying for kindness with your own disappearance." Outside, the church bells rang the hour. Christopher signed his name. The sound of the pen felt louder than it should have. Because somewhere inside him, something old and frightened had just realized. There would be no going back to being invisible. And the cost of stepping forward was no longer hypothetical. It was scheduled. The audit began at 8:07 a.m. Christopher knew because he was already on Register 3 when the suits appeared, 2 men, 1 woman, all carrying clipboards like shields. The flickering light overhead chose that moment to behave perfectly. No warning. No mercy. His manager smiled too wide. "Routine," she said, loud enough for customers to hear. Quiet enough to lie. Christopher scanned items slowly. Milk. Bread. Apples. Each beep landed like a second hand moving forward. He felt oddly calm, which frightened him more than panic would have. The woman auditor approached. "Christopher Walker?" "Yes," he said. "Please step aside." Customers watched. Not with cruelty. With curiosity. That was worse. They led him to the office. The door closed. The room felt too small for the years he'd spent avoiding it. "We've identified a discrepancy pattern," the woman said, flipping pages. "Consistent underrings. Always small. Always with customers in visible distress." Christopher nodded. "I know." The man across from him frowned. "You admit it?" "Yes." Silence. "Why?" the woman asked, not accusatory, just precise. Christopher took a breath. Thought of Judy's hands in his. Of the folder in the church basement. Of being tired of shrinking. Because I thought being kind meant disappearing, he said. I was wrong. The man scoffed. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one, Christopher replied. The woman studied him. This is termination-level misconduct. Christopher nodded again. I understand. A knock on the door. The manager entered, pale. There's someone here to see you. Marianne stepped in. The auditors stiffened. And you are? Marianne handed over credentials. Real ones. Legal ones. The kind that changed posture in a room. I represent a restitution and compliance partnership, she said. We'd like to propose an alternative resolution. She laid out the plan calmly: repayment, oversight, community restitution. Christopher's role formalized, not as a thief, but as a steward under supervision. Transparent. Accountable. Visible. The auditors exchanged glances. This is highly unusual, the man said. So is ignoring quiet good until it becomes quiet harm, Marianne replied. The woman auditor leaned back. If we accept this, Mr. Walker resigns his position. Christopher didn't hesitate. Yes. And submits to review. Public record. Yes. And if this fails, the man added, you carry the blame. Christopher met his eyes. I already do. Silence stretched. Then a nod. Approved, the woman said. Conditional. When they left, Christopher felt hollow, and lighter. Outside the office, Judy waited. Eva too, eyes wide. Richard on speakerphone, listening silently. Christopher took off his apron. Folded it carefully. Set it on the counter. I'm done here, he said. Eva stepped forward. Hugged him hard. I'm proud of you, she whispered. That almost broke him. That night, Christopher stood in the backyard with Bruno, cold air sharp in his lungs. The house behind him glowed warmly. Inside, Judy was on the phone, planning. Believing. Marianne's message buzzed in, tomorrow, we begin. Christopher looked at his hands. Still trembling. Still his. For the first time, he didn't wish them steady. Because steadiness had kept him small. And shaking meant something was finally moving. He whispered into the dark, not as a prayer, but as a promise. I'm here. And this time, he meant it. The first check cleared at dawn. Not a windfall. Not a miracle. Just enough to stop the foreclosure clock from screaming. Christopher watched the bank app refresh, the numbers settling into place like they were testing whether he deserved them. He didn't celebrate. He made coffee. Judy watched him from the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. It's real, she said, like she was afraid the words might scare it away. Christopher nodded. So are the consequences. They sat at the table in the quiet that comes after a storm passes but leaves everything wet and changed. Eva texted a heart. Richard called, said nothing for a long moment, then finally, I didn't know dads could do that. Do what? Christopher asked. Change, Richard said. That word stayed with him. The grocery store replaced him in a week. No ceremony. No speeches. Just a new name badge at Register 3. Christopher drove past it on his way to the church basement and felt something unexpected, not grief, but relief. The basement looked different now. Brighter. Busier. People he recognized from the store sat in folding chairs, paperwork in their hands, faces tight with the fear of being seen for needing help. Christopher stood at the front. Not confident. Present. This isn't charity, he said. It's trust. And trust means we don't pretend. A woman raised her hand. What if we mess it up? Christopher smiled gently. Then we fix it. Together. Out loud. Marianne watched from the back, arms folded, eyes soft. She didn't intervene. That was new too. Weeks passed. The tremor stayed. So did the work. Christopher learned how to say no without apologizing. How to ask questions without shrinking. How to let people see the cost of doing good without turning it into a performance. One evening, as he locked up, he found the little girl from aisle 7 sitting on the steps with her mother. "You're not at the store anymore," the girl said, accusing. Christopher crouched to her level. "No." "Why?" He thought for a moment. Because helping quietly wasn't enough anymore. She nodded like that made sense. "My dad says that too." Her mother met Christopher's eyes. "Thank you," she said, "not for anything specific. For presents." Late that night, Christopher stood in his kitchen, hands resting on the counter. The light above flickered once, then steadied. He noticed. And smiled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old apron he'd kept. Ran his fingers over the worn fabric. Then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer, not as a retreat, but as a reminder. Bruno padded in, tail wagging, faith intact. Christopher knelt, burying his face in the dog's fur, breathing in the ordinary miracle of being needed honestly. He thought of the register. The letter. The call. The choice that had felt like stepping off a ledge. He had not become rich. He had not become famous. He had not become someone else. He had become visible. And that, he understood now, was the breakthrough he'd been waiting for all along. Christopher turned off the kitchen light. This time, when the room went dark, nothing felt missing. Because he was finally standing in his own life. Hands shaking, heart open, no longer afraid of being counted.